Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. And thank you also to Laurent, Diane, and Alexander for being our speakers and moderators tonight. For those of you who are going to be watching the replay, it's April 22nd. Also, I hope what we will say will not be outdated too soon. And we are really happy to have this discussion tonight with at French Founders because it's in our DNA to create bridges between corporates, entrepreneurs, and investors. And that's what we're able to do tonight, thanks to you guys. And I'd like to mention that we have created recently an impact club that is exactly the kind of discussion we want to have in this club. And today is also Earth Day, and we had actually planned this discussion before Christmas, and we had no idea that it would be so relevant today to tackle this topic, not only because of Earth Day, but also because of the situation. So thank you very much to you three and to you all here listening. And very shortly, I'll introduce you three, and then you can go deeper with Diane. But we have Laurent Marcel, who has been with Danone for 15 years. And you arrived, I think, in New York 4 years ago to open Danone Ventures, Danone Manifesto Ventures. And you aim at investing in startups that are doing good, that are sustainable and innovative in the food industry. We have with us Alexander. You are CEO of HowGood, and you're actually one of the startups that's working with Danone Ventures, and Danone Venture has invested in HowGood, and we're going to hear more about your solution and how you work together, and we're looking forward to it. And we have also Diane, who's going to be our moderator tonight. Thank you, Diane. And Diane is an expert of this industry because she spent 8 years with Sopexa, a communication agency focusing on especially on food and beverage, and some years in China and some years in the US. So you are really aware of what's going on around the world in this industry. So before you can start the discussion, I'd just like to remind everyone that for the questions, you are free to ask any questions, of course, but please use the Q&A or Q&A depending on your version. That's at the bottom of your screen. You have the Q&A section, and you can use it to ask your questions, and we will try to answer them either during the discussion or at the end. There will be a time for Q&A. So thank you very much. And Diane, Alexander, Laurent, I leave the floor to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's start by saying that with $23 billion raised in food tech over the last 10 years, it is during the most recent years that we have seen the most evolution in this sector, as funding has raised by 278% between 2016 and 18. So the key takeaway here is definitely that food tech and food technology are no longer a niche industry, and the world is now stepping up to answer the global challenges our food system is facing. So questions like how to feed up a population set to hit 9 billion people by 2050, or how technology can help to reverse the effects of climate change and also reduce the 1 trillion food waste each year. Or how do we create more sustainable and efficient agriculture practices? So I'm delighted today to tackle these topics with two key players from the industry that have joined forces to create new ways of thinking food tech. So let's start with you, Alexander. Can you share with us how you came up with this idea and give us a brief introduction of solution provided by HowGood?
Sure. So, you know, the basis of this idea came from my brother and I actually talking about there being no centralized solution for the gathering of understandings around impacts. And so every company or individual that wanted to research a topic was typically going off and largely doing it by themselves, creating a hyper-specific topic on, you know, growing corn in one region in one set of practices, but not putting all of those different sources together so you could see the bigger picture. And so it was this idea that consumers care about this, we need to make it easy for them. Companies care about this, we need to make it easy for them, and so do grocers. And that was 13 years ago. And so it was this very kind of slow build of a passion project that in the beginning was just something we were developing almost like in a wiki style that was just gonna be free, but then slowly developed into something where it was very hard to get accurate information from people just providing it. And so it ended up being something that we took on more personally and became a passion project. And eventually it became a full-time job. And eventually there was enough interest in the data that we had been passionate about for so long that it could turn into a scalable venture.
Interesting. I assume this is what's interesting Danone Ventures when decided to collaborate with HowGood, Laurent. But considering that tech is fastly shaping the future, and this is a very competitive field, that all the ventures are looking for the new unicorns. What is the vision of Danone Venture regarding that point? And can you walk us through your decision-making process when investing?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the vision, I think, is basically two ideas that were really at the origin of the start of Danone Ventures. I think the first idea is that the food industry has been going through a complete revolution over the last 15 years. I think 15 years ago, the food industry was a fairly concentrated industry with big players, selling mostly in large supermarkets. And if you look today, and I think you'll have a good expression of that with HowGood today, it's become a vibrant world with thousands of entrepreneurs in food and food tech, by the way. And these entrepreneurs, they completely transform the way that you can manufacture food, market food, sell food, measure sustainability of food. We'll see with HowGood. So I think in a way it's a complete revolution where technology plays a very big part. The second aspect, which I think is interesting in this revolution, is that it's not just technology, it's also that young generations of consumers today are passionate about food. And I think that's a chance today that whether you call them millennials or people in their 20s, 30s, or even below, actually, young generations are really passionate about food. So they like to cook, they like to try new diets, they like to go online to find new forms of food. They are very open, they read labels, they read the ingredients, they want to understand the origin of food, they want to understand the impact of food on health and the planet. So I think it's actually a very exciting time to be in this industry with the food revolution. And again, you'll have a great example with Alex today. The second big idea is more from let's say from a Danone perspective, that if you see a revolution like this happening and hundreds or thousands of entrepreneurs coming, I think there is two ways of looking at that. Either you see that as a threat and something you should be feared about, or that you keep distant from you, or, and that's of course the way we look at that, the second one, or you see it as an amazing opportunity. And in fact, I think one of the reasons why we created Danone Ventures 4 years ago is because we felt that if we were able to partner with some of these entrepreneurs, that could completely change the way Danone operates as a player. And to your second question, then on our criteria for investment, I think there are really three criteria that we are obsessed with. The first one is the team, so the people we have in front of us. You can have the greatest idea if you don't have the hunger, the passion, the resilience to go all the way, where the great idea might fail. And I think it's, of course, a bit stating the obvious here, but I think on purpose, I think that's the first thing I wanted to mention. The second, decision-making criteria is really the disruption. And again, you'll have a great example of that with HowGood. When we see entrepreneurs, one of the key questions we ask ourselves is how unique, how ownable, and how scalable is the idea? How much can the new idea can become a big idea? And that's the entire disruption theme that we'll cover today. And the last one, which is probably a bit more specific to us, Danone Ventures, because we are part of a big group like Danone, and it's a bit different from probably a classical venture capital group, is one of the key questions we ask ourselves is, how can these entrepreneurs and their idea, product, technology model, how can it change radically what Danone does in the next 5 to 10 years. So it's long term. And of course, you'll see a demo, and you'll hear from Alex today. When we met Alex and the HowGood team, we really felt that we had a great team in front of us of people that had been 12 years searching data on sustainability. We thought that what they had was really unique, and you'll get a sense of it. And finally, we really felt that if Danone was able to work well with HowGood, it could completely change a lot of the things that Danone does today.
Yes. So Alexander, can you explain more what does this collaboration consist of, and share with us a concrete example of solution that you have developed with Danone Ventures?
Yeah. So I'll show you a little bit of the platform that we have developed. The collaboration with Danone has been really interesting because how impassioned you felt both teams were. And it was really interesting for us as a company that had always kind of shied away from investment from companies that we are providing data to actually start to interact with Danone and see how much it wasn't like one person or one group leading a charge. It was a company that was as interested as many of the activists that we interact with about the change that it can create in the world. That was pretty exciting. And so when we started to say, look, we have the largest database, is what we had developed, the largest database in the world for food sustainability. And when we brought that to Danone, we started to be able to say, how could a company as big as you interact with this data and make changes in the world that change people's lives, change greenhouse gas impacts, start to repair waterways, increase biodiversity, right? How do you work at that kind of scale with the right data? And so what I'm going to show you is our approach to that. So I'm going to share my screen here. So anyone who's walked away from their computer needs to come back. All right, so you should all be able to see down here in Florida, this example of a tomato being grown. And the idea is very much that when you're looking at a tomato being grown and you say, okay, what are the major factors we want to look at? We want to look at the water impact, right? We want to look at the pesticide profile. We want to look at the labor impact. We see the water impact isn't much, but it's a bad pesticide profile and there's well-documented labor issues going on. So we say, okay, start to understand what that scenario looked like there. How do we compare that to California, right? California, water issue is worse, but pesticides better, labor is better. What happens if we switch to organic? Okay, it helps with the pesticide problem, but doesn't make it dramatically better. What if we look in 2 locations in Mexico? Okay, we actually have similar things going on there, doesn't solve our problem. And then we see, oh, in Canada, it looks like a solution. Reality is that this is a trap that we often fall into, which is the oversimplification of the food system. So we're only looking at 3 factors here. And the reality is that if we started to look at the greenhouse gases, there would be really heavy impacts because these are being grown in greenhouses heated by fossil fuels. So it's not the solution that we want. And so to not fall into that trap of the oversimplification of our food system, we've started to say, how do we track everything? And while you cannot track everything, you can use the best data and the best science out there to try and track as much as possible. HowGood, we track things additionally like the soil health, the biodiversity, and 127 other things. So how do we put this data, which we've gathered now for 33,000 ingredients, but not just for 5 locations, both regionally and also globally, into practice for a company like Danone or any large player who wants to create change in the world? Well, the reality is they're probably not just selling tomatoes. They're selling a product. So you have to not only track all of these supply chains for tomatoes, but also for sugar, for canola oil, and for every other ingredient that goes in there. Then for each of those regions, you have to think about what happens if you change a practice, a standard, or switch to a different location, right? If you change to organic or fair trade, how does that affect all those different factors? If you just switch to no-till in one location versus another, the greenhouse gas impact of that is different. So you have to be able to represent the complexity of the food system and then make it useful. So this is what we built together with working with the different formulation teams who build products within Danone. What you'll see here is essentially, you can look across the top and you can select metrics. So here we have the sustainability metrics. the nutritional metrics, planetary health metrics, and ingredient and product claims. You can then go through and select the ones you want, like greenhouse gas emissions, soil health, all the other ones that you're interested in. And then, if you've already selected a product, for this example, we're going to be looking at a formulation for a new almond milk. You can see that it's better than 72% of the industry. You can also look at this by category or other factors. And then you can come down and see for that product by ingredient and by the impacts that you've selected, how it scores. So the first one that we'll see that's a problem within this product view is something like almonds. So we're going to select the almonds. We're going to go into almonds and we're going to say, okay, we've got big issues around greenhouse gas emissions and water use. We're sourcing them from the US. What are our other options for sourcing location? Now, we could also change the standard or the ingredient, or go in and put in custom practices. We'll just do one example for today. We're going to change this to Spanish dry farmed almonds. They're no longer be irradiated. They have a number of different benefits. And even though within this location, they're going to be shipped to the US, shifting to Spain still increases your, makes your greenhouse gas emissions better. You have a better water impact and biodiversity all increase. So you can see a very clear win from this, right? We can go into, there's all sorts of details that are preloaded, like where the factories are, all of that data, how it's traveling. So when a company is putting this in, they can see the impact. The idea here is to be able to help people make quick decisions. They would then save this, it'd go into their portfolio view. But that gives you an idea of how we're trying to use this data with our partners like Danone.
That's very interesting, and I think that's where you were interesting, Laurent, because this is an example for the US market, but that's also lead to a global solution.
Yeah, and I think when we met Alex and the HowGood team a year and a half ago, we really felt that the knowledge and the tool they had developed could really make a huge impact globally for a company like Danone. I think Alex just showed you a brief demo here, but I think what convinced us is that they had the really in-depth knowledge, data, products, ingredients. They don't take shortcuts. They have also a very integrated view of sustainability. And they are very open to work with manufacturers. So what we really liked when we met the team is that they do not just give you a score. They in fact create a tool with which you can reformulate your products, rethink your sourcing, and improve your score. So we really felt that that was a very big idea and a very big tool that could have an impact not just on Danone North America or our products here, but I think beyond the US have a global impact. Now, of course, one thing that we always very cautious is progressing in steps and finding the right anchor partners within a big group like ours. This is something we'll discuss afterwards, but I think it's always very important to find the right partnerships. And so when we started meeting with the HowGood team, Alex and the team, one of the first things we did is not just keep the idea for us, Danone Ventures, but start meetings with the Danone US team to test with them the idea, and of course their appetite to use the tool, because if we become an investor and nobody else than us is interested in Danone, of course we know we are not going to make an impact. And so we really started from these US conversations. Alex, I'm not sure if you might want to comment how this is progressing. So we really see the development of a US formulation partnership as a great starting point to really build a success together. But yes, I think beyond the US example, I am convinced, we are convinced all together that is a tool and knowledge that can be applied in many different countries in the world.
Yeah, I mean, and as Laurent is saying, so I think it's 2 weeks until the full launch for the US tool now, which is really exciting. But at the same time, even the kind of betas that have gone out and the different tests have caused the international team. So now we're looking at rollouts for this year for Danone International, as well as for integrations with the marketing, the different teams. So marketing wants to understand all this information, just like the impact team. So they saw what the impact teams had, and they said, wait, can we use this to understand how customers are responding to this data so that we can help push for faster growth in areas where customers are responding. And then you start to have this kind of full picture where people can do it based on the impact side, and then other people can say, yes, and this matches like our long-term vision and our goals, or we can formulate a new product that we want to bring to market based on these really high standards because we know customers are interested. And so there's this nice cross collaboration between the syndicated data, sales data, as well as the impact data.
So yes, this is a great example of a collaboration, but I imagine that while decided to partner together at the beginning, you both may have envisioned some challenges. And assuming that today, part of our audience, we have both startups and vendor companies that want to learn from this experience, can you share with us some challenges that you have faced during this process and later on, still again during the collaboration?
Who starts? You want to tell the truth, Alex, or you want me to tell the truth?
Sure. I can go first. I can actually remember so the first time my chief innovation officer came to me and he said, hey, you know, this project that I've been working with Danone, you know, with the commercial side and kind of developing it with Google Food Labs and this whole thing. And it was a thought process that was starting to take off. I want you to meet with the Danone investment team. And I honestly, I laughed. I was like, no, I don't meet with companies' investment teams, you know? And, you know, he said, I think these guys are different, right? And I think I was a bit jaded having dealt with a lot of big food, and especially over a 10-year period. There's a lot of shift in the industry right now. But I wasn't expecting the authenticity and the commitment that I was pretty inspired by when I met the Danone team. You know, there was this moment in one of our meetings where, you know, they were looking at our app, right? And they were looking at the different scores, and they said, you know, some of our products don't meet your criteria. And I was thinking in my head, here we go. This is when they're going to say, you know, we want you to change your criteria, or if we invest, do we get a say in this piece? And instead they said, how do we do better? What can we change? You know, and it kind of gave me chills. It was like such an open, direct eagerness to do better in the world that I was like, I want to be a part of this. And I feel like if we work together, we can do more. And so now I'm incredibly proud that they're our investor and the work that we've done together and what we're developing. And so it was an amazing shift, let alone the personal relationships that I've developed with the team and been inspired by. So yeah, it was a journey for me and a really good one. It opened my eyes to a lot.
So Alex, you just gave a very nice answer. So now I can tell the truth. No, but the truth is that I think maybe starting by what you said, I think it's, I'll come back to that, but I think it's the quality of the relationship is critical. But I think that there are challenges and there will be challenges. And I think, you know, having been with Danone Ventures for 4 years, so basically part of a large group that's spending our days working with entrepreneurs, it's obvious that there are, you know, big differences between the two, and there are, you know, clearly challenges. And there are, if I step in the shoes of Alex for a second, he didn't say that, he was too kind. I think, yes, there is great relationship, but yet there are challenges. And I think one of these challenges that I can see is that a team like HowGood is a small team that goes very fast and that is very, you know, short-term result driven in the good sense. So it have a great ability to go fast and invent new solutions. And that's what you see in many food and food tech startups. On the other side, the strength of big groups like Danone is not necessarily speed, it's much more the depth, the scale, the ability to think big. So if I take HowGood, how can I make it something really big? But the counterpart to that is that, you know, you have quite a lot of people exposed to it. So I think from what I can see, and if I'm a bit less nice, with ourselves than Alex. I think one of the challenges for someone like Alex and his team is that when they go to the US, they see quite a few people and experts who have a say on things. When they communicate with our central teams, there is also a long list of people who have different expertise and experience. So I think one of the big challenge that I see, and Alex, you will feel free to comment on that, is to navigate through that and to make sure that there is enough patience on both sides and resilience to make sure that the small and agile company can fit over the time with a larger and probably somewhat slower organization. And I think it's been, so far it's been a great journey. Maybe on a very positive note, I think that's something you said, Alex. I think like in any relationship, there are challenges, and if you want to go through the challenges, the trust between the teams is absolutely critical. And that's why when I was saying at the beginning, we value teams, and this is so important. It's not just finding the best individuals. It's also sitting down with people and trying to assess, are we going to be able to go together through a long partnership, which will have ups and downs. And I think I can compare with it. I think with HowGood we have a great result so far, and I think that's why we are both here today. By the way, even Alex coming to a French founders event.
Well, I think to your point, I guess I was talking more about the investment side. The side with Danone as a larger company, yeah, there have been some big challenges. And I think one of the nice things about having worked with Laurent and the team was I had a lot of faith in the authenticity. And so there was a moment where I was presented, where I was able to actually challenge the leadership of Danone and say, like, it's too hard for a company like us to integrate with your company. You have to also come towards us, and know that wouldn't be something that fell on deaf ears. That would be they wouldn't be like, who is that small company to say that to us? They would say, okay, let's sit in a room and figure out what we can do better, what you can do better, and how we can make a better solution. And so, that moment is still scary, saying something like that to leadership, but you also have to be willing to do that if you're in a startup and you do have a shorter time frame, right? You have to be able to say, we need you to move faster, and trust that the people are going to hear that and respond to that. And so there were challenges there, and it's an organization you can be direct with, and they'll be direct back to you.
Yeah, and I think that's right now startups are facing some challenges within the COVID-19 context. And I was wondering, what is your vision, Alexander, regarding that, regarding the startups and the challenges that they are facing now within this context?
Yeah, it's such a hard question because of the breadth of the way people have been impacted. If you're a startup that has some, people and has been around for a while, maybe a PPP loan in the US will help, or maybe in different countries, there's different kind of opportunities for like financial support, but also all of that, in the US is already all gone, right? So there's the financial challenges. Within the food space, it's really interesting because there's this huge demand for food, but also supply chains are impacted. Especially the smaller you are, the more likely your supply chains are impacted at a level that makes it so that you can't actually source an ingredient. We're actually developing a module within our tool right now for supply chain resilience, right? That we want to be able to give to these small players so that they can basically see their supply chains, the resilience of that ingredient, especially if this drags on for a longer period, giving them options to switch to either other ingredients or other sourcing locations for that ingredient. But everyone you talk to is facing this in a different way and dealing with different challenges. There's the remote challenge. For us as a company, we're dealing with a lot of companies, we were in really wonderful conversations with a big company in Italy that was like ready to sign and be following up Danone to be the second big company to launch the FIT tool, the formulation impact tool. And, obviously with what happened in Italy, like they had complete disruption. And so now we've just been having, I'm actually still talking to those teams, but no longer about work. Like once a month, I'm checking in with them and seeing how they're doing. And there's something beautiful about it in that I'm getting to know them in a way that maybe I wouldn't have, but we also have to accept that for them, this isn't able to progress. There are other companies we're finding whose like tech team, everything else is, within the food space is moving so fast and everyone's focused on supply chain and all this stuff that some tech teams don't have anything to do. So now they're reaching out and saying, hey, we suddenly have bandwidth. We want to implement the HowGood formulation tool. Can we move it ahead faster? And so there's this very interesting balance, and it's incredibly, within the startup space, it's having a lot of different impacts. And it really, I have some friends in India, and what they're facing and their employees are facing is so different and can be so much more challenging than, me in the more tech and data space, right? Like all of my employees can work from their home, and I'm incredibly grateful that they all can be, safe and isolated. Laurent's, the teams from Danone all over the world are still working to provide us food. And that is, beautiful and risky and there's challenges there. And so I'm grateful to that, and to the small companies doing it as well.
Yeah, and I'm convinced that within this context, the food tech will, this is an opportunity to maybe shape the future of the production standpoint, or a new innovation in terms of retailer standpoint. What is your vision about it, Laurent?
My vision, which is also, based on how our portfolio companies are affected by the crisis, and we have 18 companies and in different countries, from the US to Europe to India. And so every one of them has different shocks to absorb. I think the big picture is the one that Alex was saying, which is a context where there is a very strong demand for food, but where it's super complicated to manufacture, to supply, where the entire retail is very disorganized because people suddenly have very unpredictable consumption patterns. So I think I agree with what Alex just said, is that it's a very difficult time to read and to navigate through, even if the demand for food is still strong. In a way, we are lucky to be in food today. On the tech or the food tech companies, I think that there is different ways to the answers to this question. I think the first part is that in a way it's more difficult to be a startup today than being a big group, because you usually have less luxury of cash and balance sheet, and you don't have the same experience or teams to manage crisis, business continuity plans, and all things that big groups do. And on the other hand, I think there is great opportunities for food and food tech startups, because they have the agility, the ability to move fast, that big groups don't necessarily have. In our portfolio, for example, there is
Laurent,
that sells. Can you hear me? So it's a company based in Chicago that sells fresh foods, fresh beverages, and fresh snacks in vending machines that are connected to an app. These vending machines, they are located in office buildings, campuses of universities, and airports primarily. So you can imagine that just a couple of weeks after the crisis started and the shelter in place started, their business went from 100 to little. And what they've been pretty amazing is in a matter of weeks, they've launched their own direct-to-consumer delivery system with their own trucks. So the trucks, instead of going from office buildings to airports to campuses, they started going door to door and implementing a direct-to-consumer business that, by the way, works both in Chicago and Manhattan. So that's the moment of advertising here. But more seriously, I think it's pretty amazing to see how quickly a young food tech company is able to evolve to offer something different to its consumers that I'm convinced in the long run will be an additional business for them. So it's not just that they go through the crisis, it's also that I think they will have an incremental revenue after the crisis goes. Another example, which I really like in our portfolio, is a company based in Europe called Phoenix, which is one of the food waste reduction leaders in France, based in Paris. And among the ways of working, they have this app that allows consumers or shoppers to see from retailers the kind of available baskets every evening that are sold at a discounted price, because these are foods that are almost expired. So just a few days after the crisis started, what Phoenix decided is to give away the app for free, so that more and more retailers could use that, and it became, I think, a great move to support on one hand, shoppers and retailers, and of course on the other hand, enhancing the visibility of their platform. So I think, and I could give many examples. There are lots of food and food tech companies that are very active when it comes to making donations, engaging with communities. So I think my view on the food tech or the food startups today is that it's very tough. I think it's going to stay tough for a few months, and it's even tougher than for large groups to some extent. But I also think they have young companies an agility and an ability to make things happen. That's also a great asset to go through the crisis.
I agree with you. I think there will be many more solutions to be developed, and small players and bigger ones that will certainly partner to find a solution to rise up from this unprecedented context.
One fun thing that I forgot to mention was just that we actually ran the numbers. So we ran our impact data against the sales numbers to see whether or not during this time impact-driven purchasing rose faster than conventional or lower than conventional, right? Because there's been this storyline that everyone's just buying kind of comfort food and all the things that they used to buy and all this. And we've averaged about a 90% increase in growth for sustainably marketed products and an 80% increase for conventional. So even during a time like this, it's been interesting to see, even with the financial pieces going on and all of that sustainably marketed products have still outpaced the growth of the market. So you see a lot of commitment to that side of things, which is interesting to track and to see whether that continues as this goes on. And yeah.
Thank you for sharing this last example.
Yeah.
And that I imagine we have question from the audience, and I'm reading now a question from Stephanie to you, Alexander. How do you collect the data, and how do you standardize them?
Yeah, my normal slides start with like a whole section on that. So we collect data from 387 different data partners, and the normalization is different from every one of them because the complexity of the food system and the partners mean that you're dealing with some who are very organized, but the vast majority are not. So you're dealing with a lot of kind of very dirty files that you're having to clean up, normalize, and also check for accuracy. So ideally you have multiple sources for one data set and you're comparing them against each other. You're using basic kind of both machine learning and kind of big data best practices for each question that you're trying to solve. Yeah, that's the simplest. There's 200 different industry experts that we brought together to interpret the data. We have our own internal research team that also goes out and gathers their own data. And then we have data partnerships with syndicated data players as well. So it's really every source you can get your hands onto, you should, and then you should rank it for the quality of the data.
Okay. I think we have many questions regarding the data gathering and how you get them and what is the process. So I have another question for you, Laurent, regarding from Richard. How does Danone see the food trends in the next 2 years?
Oh, that's a tough question. Maybe I should pass it to you, Alex. No, that's a tough question because, and I guess I can imagine the question relates to the crisis that we're in, and it's true that it's a moment where we don't yet have a full understanding and knowledge of what's happening. It's a very volatile environment. So in March, you had, especially in the US, really extreme purchasing behaviors. And of course, the stocking of toilet paper is the most notorious, but I think even in food, you've had categories that had been dormant for quite a few years, as suddenly went to the roof. I will not specifically take examples, but I think it's true that in March, we've seen really behaviors that were difficult to read. April, in a way, see some new shifts happening. Consumers are at home, so the entire retail is disorganized. Of course, by definition, away from home channel has disappeared, but even convenience stores suffer. So the first and easy answer would be to tell you that today I'm not sure yet what's happening and what will continue to happen in the next months will affect over the long run the food industry. On top of that, and I think you have to accept that there is going to be an economic factor, which is that we are going to go through months of recession. We just don't know how many months and how severe the recession will be. But I think it's already a fact that this is going to come, and it will probably not be a fast rebound because confinements deconfinement will be gradual. It will be controlled. We were discussing with some of our colleagues in China recently. They were saying, in China, restaurants reopened, but many of them are still empty because people still prefer to have their meals at home or at the office. So it's difficult to read, but I think maybe a few candid thoughts. Not that I pretend that I have the truth here, but maybe observations or thoughts that I could share today. That I think shape a bit my answer to this question. I think the first one is that some of the behaviors that have happened during this crisis are going to last in a way. They are going to stay, and they will shape durably some of the consumption patterns. So we are 50 people today during this webinar. We could have met in person. Some people could have traveled, and yet we still managed to have a pretty lively conversation. Each of us is going through this experience of being able to communicate and learn from home. I'm not saying we will all be stuck at home forever. I'm just saying that some of these behaviors, we will realize that in fact there is a benefit to it because you take less planes and you can work somewhat efficiently to some extent. I was talking about people cooking earlier. I think, yes, people cook much more now, and you start seeing countries where people think this is going to last because different generations, people are have rediscovered that. So there was a very interesting article in the New York Times a couple of days ago around that. If you move to consumption or in transformation, I think what's going to really change radically, I think, is the retail organization, and more specifically, of course, all the online and delivery models. I think this is something that was happening already before. And I think I'm just stating the obvious here, saying that this crisis is just going to accelerate it. I give you the example of farmers' fridge. I can give you many other examples. And in fact, what you hear from China is that the online penetration has increased a lot through the crisis, from different age groups, by the way, and it has stayed to some extent after the crisis. So I think that will stay. And finally, and sorry, it's a bit long answer. I think the big question is the one that Alex was mentioning just a second ago, is do we think that this crisis is going to change what I was saying earlier, which is young generations of consumers being excited with food, reading labels, and in a way being very interested about the health and sustainability impact of food. And there, of course, I'm very biased where I am, but I really think it's going to, again, be amplified by the crisis. I think it's a health crisis, so I think the importance of health in everyday life will only be reinforced. It's a health crisis that started by, from what we know today, wildlife animals. So I think there is a real question around how we look at the ecosystem around us, and I think health being very linked to what we eat as consumers. So I think I'm really convinced that the food revolution I was mentioning earlier might be affected for a few weeks or a few months in case purchasing power limits that or retail is disorganized. But I think in the long run, I think that's what Alex was saying. I think it's very interesting to hear that they have some proofs already of that, is that yeah, I think the health and sustainability food revolution will not be stopped by the COVID crisis.
Yeah. Would you like me to bring together these three questions?
Yes, we have a question regarding how granular is the data, and maybe it would be great if you can summarize it.
Yeah, all three kind of talk about the difference, the differences between all of these questions revolve around the difference of the granularity of the data, really. So yes, the example that I gave was top level and commodity. So if you're sourcing commodity almonds from California versus from Spain, right? Can you get down to suppliers? Yes, you can get down to suppliers. Can you get down to farms? Yes, you can get down to farms. There's a level of partnership that goes on between us and the different organizations that we're interacting with. And so we can use everything all the way down to GPS data to be able to, if we're looking at deforestation, right? We'll actually use deforestation maps and GPS data to track at the farm level when that's available. One of the things we do is we hold the company and the farms responsible for being transparent. And if they're not, then what we present you with is the risk, right? What's your labor risk for this if you're not sure, where your cacao is coming from, right? Is there a risk that you have child labor in your supply chain? That's what's going to show up unless you can prove to us that you're not doing that. So we're trying to reward transparency and traceability throughout the entire system and push companies, suppliers, and everyone along that line to provide better and better data. And so as long as you're only rewarding when someone has achieved it, you're okay. Every once in a while, there might be a totally great farm that has great practices that isn't getting rewarded for what they're doing. And what we're saying to them is like, reach out to us and demonstrate it. We don't charge them anything for that. We'll add them into our system, and that'll help people understand what the impact is of sourcing from there. Someone else asked about, can we track, for example, what Horizon is doing with moving towards a regenerative ag food system and the great changes that they're making throughout their already organic milk supply. And the answer is yes, that's exactly what the system is built to do. It's built to get into the nitty gritty of where everything is being sourced and what the impacts of those are. The scale of the data means that not everything is always the same. So your solution for one crop and how you're gathering that is different than the solution for the next crop. So I would love to say that, like, here's a simple answer for how we gather the data. The reality is it's an incredibly complex question because our food system is incredibly complex. And so if you wanted a simple answer, it would be a lie. If you want a real answer, we can take a few days. We can talk ingredient by ingredient. And that was one of our early conversations with Laurent. He was like, great, tell us how you gather this. And then they were like, okay, we're going to need a longer meeting. And when we spent multiple meetings on that, right? And that's part of what we've committed to. And that's partially doable because we took a very long approach to this, and we didn't start off, just going to venture funding and saying, we're going to grow this thing really big. We started off by saying, how do we create the best data available? And we didn't have to, create returns or anything like that. So it allowed us to be very focused on what the problem is and building the quality of the data before bringing anything to market.
Thank you, Alexander. We're going to take two last questions. One from Richard, who is saying, do you make a difference between sustainable and certified food like fair trade and Rainforest Alliance? I think that's specifically for the US.
Yeah. So sustainable can be defined in a lot of different ways. So we have our own internal definition for sustainable, but certified food like Rainforest disappeared. Certified food like Rainforest and what was the other one?
Fair trade, no?
And fair trade. Yeah, I mean, we have a different breakdown for fair trade International, right? All the different ones. We even have different definitions for them in different countries, right? Fair trade means different things in different countries. With some fair trade certifiers, they'll send someone to every farm. With other fair trade certifiers in certain countries, no one ever goes to the farm to check. It's just a form that someone's filling out, right? That's a very different quality of data that you're receiving when you're inputting that data into your data set. So you need to understand what each of those mean for each crop in each region and apply that to it.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for Virginie and Louise, but we can maybe see later for this question. But one last from Emmanuel. Can the same tool be developed, adapted for the natural ingredients used in the beauty industry? So that's a bit of an expand, but interesting as well. That's for you, Alexander, I think.
Oh,
Sorry.
I thought you said for Laurent, so I started typing
no,
a response to someone. I'm sorry.
Questions are only for you, I'm sorry.
No, yeah, so which question? Sorry. I was
so
typing the response.
Could your tool be developed for the beauty industry, for the natural ingredients in the beauty industry?
Yes, and we just signed a contract. So we've been developing the metrics for beauty, cosmetics, cleaning supplies for the last 4 years now. Actually, the chief innovation officer that introduced us to Danone came on to do that project, and he built it for 3 years. We actually started with just beauty, and then it turned out cleaning supplies use the same ingredients as beauty supplies, which is disturbing. And there's a lot of shock as to what's going on in the beauty industry. And so the traceability is more challenging there. The data is really interesting. And yeah, we're building it for them, and we can't wait to kind of publish that in the next year to year and a half.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So there are questions left, but maybe Alexander, if you're okay, I can be the messenger for you between the questions and between the members who still have long questions and you, if it's okay for you. So Virginie, Julien, we'll get back to you. So thank you, Laurent, Dan, and Alexander. It was really interesting to have you all here gathered for this discussion. I think it was one of the first time we had a conversation like that at French Founders. So we hope to have more. And actually, we have a few coming on the big conference we are organizing on the 29th for the members who have still not seen anything about it. It's not normal. So we are organizing a big conference about business rebound on the 29th. It's going to be 17 hours of conference. Of course, you're not going to see everything, but in the US, food industry and impact, we have Seth Goldman from Beyond Meat and Honesty who's going to be talking. We have Lucy Bash from Too Good To Go, so it's similar to Phoenix that you mentioned, Laurent. And we have also Pascal Rigaud, who is in charge notably of the strategy for Starbucks, who's going to be one of the speakers. So those could be useful for you. So don't hesitate to look at the program on the website for this conference to have more talks about food and sustainability. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you very much, Camille. Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.